Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. You see, here I'm in the blue seat in the center of the place. Well, thanks. They're flattering me. Must be that they want something. So I wrote this article 4 years ago, and as you can see, I was going through. It has a lot of red ink, so I think I changed my mind about many things, but not essential. So this is a conference about the public philosophy. What I have here is something very close to that. It is how to teach introduction into philosophy. It's a challenging subject, special subject. It has its charm, definitely. So what are we talking about? We are talking about students of philosophy, first year. So students who enroll philosophy first year, and students of other groups who take introduction to philosophy as elective subject. So I will talk about this. So age 19 or 20 with high school finish, and they are starting the university. So how to teach introduction to philosophy to them, to such population, to these guys. And I did sum up my experience and my views in some points, 17 points. So point number one, or slogans if you want. So number one, forget about didactics, forget about methodics, forget about pedagogy, don't waste your time, students' time, just do philosophy. Just go and do philosophy. Go in medias res. And in my opinion, that's the best possible advice. Pick up your subjects, themes, problems, and just start doing philosophy. There is no need for some introduction or something. Of course, you have to go slow, step by step. Everything has to be clear, understandable. You have to use Blackboard. You can put things on Blackboard and so on, but just start with philosophical problems. There is no need for any special introduction. For instance, when I started teaching this introduction to philosophy, then I asked older colleagues who did it before, and many of them told me, oh, well, it's hard, it's difficult, you should not start with philosophy right away, you should start with something else as introduction, as propedeutics, as preparation, maybe with literature or with film or something, and then step-by-step philosophy. I tried that, and that was a kind of disaster. It was a waste of time. What you should do, just go in medias res. Just take philosophical problem and start doing it. So there is how to say, there is no some special exercise before you start doing philosophy, like some yoga or stretching or warming up, something. No, just go and do it. For instance, there are in several books, in introductions to philosophy in general, or introduction to metaphysics or something. In several books, older and newer, you can find, first there is a chapter on logic. We will do some basics in logic, and then we will go and continue with philosophical problems or metaphysical, epistemological, or whatever. That's wrong. That's wrong. Don't do that. Start with philosophical problems and introduce logic as you need it. When it is needed, then introduce it. Because if you start with, let's say, empty logic, it will be boring. It will be boring. And students will not be motivated. So there are nice and natural places where logical tools can and should be introduced. Also, at least here in Croatia and in continental Europe, many people believe that philosophy is its history. So there is that philosophy is actually sort of some narrative that starts from Parmenides or Heraclitus, starts from everything is water, and then ends with Marx or Sartre or something. Don't do that, and don't tell students that everything is water or something. Well, I was told that, and then, well, come on, obviously it's not. No, young colleague, you don't understand that. It's more. It's not just water. It's a principle. Well, point number 2: do not underestimate your students. In what sense? Oh, it's hard. It's very complicated. No, it's not. You can do it the first year without any previous knowledge. You can do a lot of things. Almost everything. You just have to go slowly, step by step. Do not underestimate them. They will understand. They will understand. Though, well, it can depend from generation to generation, from group to group, but generally speaking, they can understand a lot. There is also one interesting, nice thing that I like. I have a course, Philosophy of Star Trek, and that is also very, very nice way to start philosophy. Though it's maybe better to have those students who already had introductions to philosophy or metaphysics or epistemology, something, and then work with them. It's easier. It's easier that way. But philosophy of Star Trek is also a very nice way to start it. For instance, if you are familiar with, there are prophets in the wormhole, and they don't understand that Cisco, he had a wife and he doesn't have it anymore. What do you mean? Either you have it or you don't have it. Why? Because the prophets, they don't have experience and concept of time. So they don't understand that somebody died. What do you mean died? Did exist and does not exist anymore? What does it mean? Either he exists or he does not. So that's so Star Trek is full of very, very, very nice philosophical problems. So talking about literature, one can find in literature marvelous, in science fiction or in literature in classical, for instance, about the self. There is Luigi Pirandello's novel, Uno Nessuno in 100.000, One Nobody and 10,000, or Italo Svevos, the La Coscienza di Zeno, Zeno's Conscience, or Robert Musil's Man ohne Eigenschaften, Man Without Properties. They are marvelous analysis of self. However, in my opinion, it's better to go through philosophical analysis and problems of John Locke and others, and then go to literature, to go through Descartes, Hume, Locke, Williams, Parfit, Nozick, and so on, and then go to analyze the text from the literature. For that reason, it's better to start with philosophy, with pure philosophy directly, and then go to literature, than doing the other way around. For instance, what we can teach at the introduction to philosophy, for instance, this definition of knowledge, it's regarded as a hard thing, and it is a relatively hard thing. There's justified true belief, and then Getier's counterexamples. You can teach that without any previous knowledge to students. Just if you go step by step, if you explain them everything, they will understand it. They will all understand the insight that lucky guess is not knowledge. They will all get it. So, in my opinion, it takes maybe more than half of lecture, maybe 40-50 minutes. Lecture is generally about 75 minutes. 2 times 45 minus 15, then quarter 75, something like half an hour or 1 hour. You can explain that, and students will get it, and they will know it, they will understand it. That lucky guess cannot be knowledge, and that is the counterexample to this justified true belief analysis. I'm not so sure about the free will. I'm not so sure anymore. Free will is regarded as a heavy subject. at some groups, in some generations, I was very successfully teaching that compatibilism, libertarianism, free will. What do they mean by free will? Is it possibility of choice? Is it absence of obstacles, self-control, whatever? One can teach that, and it is usually successful. Usually it is successful, students do understand that. So without any previous knowledge in philosophy, in 1 hour you can explain to them the difference between libertarianism and compatibilism. What is interesting and nice is actually compatibilism, because it's something new for them. So it's a kind of a new thing, so they are showing interest for compatibilism, comparing to classical libertarianism. Point number 3, don't try to teach history of philosophy in the introductory course. It cannot be done. Avoid the claim that everything is water, something like that. Well, in my opinion, it is, nevertheless, it is a nice thing, pedagogically, culturally, maybe even ultimately personally, to mention classical authors. If we are working on definition of knowledge, we should mention Plato. If we work on arguments against the fear of death, we have to mention Epicurus, and so on, so on. If we are talking about social contract, we have to mention Hobbes. So we have to go back to classics and mention them, but we should not focus on, we should focus on problem, not on history of philosophy. Well, ultimately these classical authors, they deserve to be mentioned. Then number 4, this is practical thing, choose the right textbook. Choose the right textbook. It's not easy to find the right textbook, and you can try this one or that one and see how does it work. For a course, Introduction to Philosophy, or for any other course, you have to have a textbook. Without textbook, you cannot work. With some photocopies or some collection of notices or something, it doesn't work. You need a book, and you need a textbook. Further, which characteristic the textbook should have? It must have, I call it ABCD structure. ABCD structure, they have a problem and solution, A, B, C, D, and say that is a good textbook, no matter whether it is dumb or stupid, but that is a good textbook, and you have to have it. You must have, in the case of free will, determinism, libertarianism, compatibilism. In epistemology, you must have foundationalism, coherentism, reliabilism, so it must have ABCD structure. That is and it has to be systematic and informative. It has to be, I invented the word, examinable, so that you can make exam from that book, that you can ask students, orally or writtenly, such that you can serve for the exam at the end of semester. And there must be questions like what is utilitarianism, what is physicalism, what is compatibilism, and so on, so on. For instance, talking about this introduction, philosophy of Star Trek, I was using examples from Star Trek in metaphysics, especially metaphysics, for a long time, but it was not possible to offer a course until the book was translated. There is this book, The Philosophy of Star Trek. When you have 20 articles about philosophical problems Star Trek, you can start the course. You can start the course. Semester has about 12 weeks. There are 20 articles. Inside, you select 12 betters, and students go from week to week, from problem to problem. It's perfectly fair, well-organized teaching. Although it is ultimately experimental, Star Trek. So you must have a textbook. My favorite textbooks I'm old-fashioned, for Introduction to Philosophy are maybe John Hosper's Introduction to Philosophical Analysis and later Coleman Lehrer and Papa's Philosophical Problems and Arguments. So this will be two maybe the role models of the books. They are proper textbooks. And they are good in content, and in structure. Of course, you cannot just give book to students. You have to go through it, through the book during the lectures and during the seminar. You have to work with them on that text. Although text is excellent, but they can't do it on their own. So roughly speaking, 1 chapter, 1 lecture, 1 week. Well, there are very nicely written introductions to philosophy, but that are not textbooks. For instance, I translated this Thomas Nagel's What Does It All Mean? I love that book, marvelous book, great book, but it's not a textbook. You give it to students, you get nothing. They just don't get the point. Or similar thing, Bernard Williams' Morality. I love that book. But if you give it to students, no response, no feedback, no nothing. They don't have ABCD structure. No matter how stupidly that may sound, they don't have the structure, they cannot be used. Or Timothy Williamson's Doing Philosophy. Great book, excellent book. I love it. However, still it's not a textbook. It is very good book for teachers, but it's not a textbook. Or Simon Blackburn's Think. They don't have ABCD structure. I'm very glad that Nigel Warburton is here. I work something like 20 years with his book. Actually, the seminar is done with his book, Philosophy Basic. That is a good book. It's, you can use it. You can use it, you can give it to students. It fills the bill. It fills the bill. Maybe it's good for seminar, maybe for a lecture. It should be a bit thicker, maybe 30% more or 50% more. Yeah. For one semester. For seminar, it's a good measure, and that is for many students. This is the first contact with philosophy. I didn't hear that anybody complained about. They did complain about Thomas Nagel's What Does It All Mean? Hey, professor, what is this? Well, nobody ever asked that question about your book. It's really useful book. Well, there are a lot of here I'm commenting this different introduction to philosophy. Well, this article should be, it's written 4 years ago, it should be published in Maribor. Boran Berčić should publish it, and he's apologizing to me once a year and promising me that it will be next year. Well, it's a you can be good teacher, I think, philosophy, and you can be popular teacher. It does not necessarily coincide. It's like coach in sport. I know a guy. He's coach of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and a lot of kids come to his classes or whatever. However, go and running. And kids are coming with gloves. They want to fight. They want to go into running. Okay, they're running. So after a couple of months, are we going to fight now? No. On the floor, roll forward. Roll forward. Are we going to fight? No, roll backward. He lets them into the ring after 1 year. Or in rowing, it's about 3 months they're doing the core muscles before they sit in the boat, because otherwise they could be injured, at least 3 months. So these coaches are good coaches, and they are boring. And they are boring, and kids don't love them. So with philosophy also, you can repeat, do the basics. So, okay, maybe they will respect you, maybe they will like you, but you will not fascinate them. Or you can go there and en passant mentioning some latest developments in philosophy, so on, that will be fascinating. So actually, if you want to be a good teacher, you have to be a bit boring, and you have to pay that price. Well, point number 5, prepare your lectures. No matter how many years are you teaching and how well how very well you know all the subject, prepare your lecture. Go through chapters, through books, day before your lecture. If you focus on the problem, if you know what are you talking about, then you will have the authority. Then you will have the authority. What gives teacher the authority? Well, the knowledge and focus. And then you will have, that will give you authority over your students and nothing else but that. Point 6. Always assume that prior knowledge of your students is 0. So at conferences, that is also a good approach. Always assume that people don't know anything. So that is at least a methodological assumption, so that you go from 0. Especially since we are talking about introductory course, it's a natural thing to take such a stance. Assume that foreknowledge is 0. So, well, here in Croatia, they have in high school some philosophy 1 year or 1 semester, I think, 1 year. Depending from teacher to teacher, some high school teachers are good, and you can feel that on the kids that are coming from these schools. You can already, after a couple of years, you can tell who is coming from which school, from which teacher. Some teachers are good. And in this, during 1 year, 2 hours a week, you can feel the difference. But the best thing to do is to assume that foreknowledge is 0. For instance, behaviorism, they all know something about it. Behaviorism, they heard about Pavlov's dogs and so on. But assume it's 0. Well, then some distinctions have to be done, and that's also maybe boring job, but it has to be done. Say, distinction between logical claim, factual claim, methodological direction, and so on, difference between things and concepts, and so on, or, for instance, the difference between identity and causation, or difference between happiness and goodness. So this can be delicate. For instance, naturalism in metaethics, it's absolutely simple thing. However, it's not easy to explain it. It's not easy to explain it. You have to explain the fact-value distinction before that. Okay, 8. Present theories in the best possible light. So whenever you are presenting any theory, present it in the best possible light, with strongest reasons, with strongest motives, explain the motives. Then you criticize the theory. 9. Present theories in contrast to each other. It's much better to present theories in contrast to each other than just present them. For instance, Thomas Kuhn's The Structure of Scientific Revolution. Usually, if you go and teach it, usually some say, yes, okay. They don't get really the point. However, if you first teach Popper's, it's from Conjunctures and Refutations, here's something to 7 or 8 points of scientific progress. First you go through these points of scientific progress, and then they look convincing. They look convincing, these points of scientific progress. That every theory contains in itself the previous one, it's more blah, blah. And then you invoke Kuhn's Structure of Scientific Revolutions. No, there's no progress. You're changing your glasses and blah, blah, blah. If you talk about changing glasses, maybe they'll remember the metaphor, but they will not understand what is the metaphor for. For that reason, it's much better to present theories in contrast to each other. Number 10, focus on the arguments. Of course, well, we have to explain what the thesis is. We have to make sure that students understand it, and then we have to go to the arguments. this is what philosophy is about, arguments. And the point is that through these 12 weeks, you can achieve that students are familiar with arguments and argumentation. So in 2 weeks, you can show them what arguments are. They will understand. After that, they will be able to recognize the argument. They will be able to tell a difference. Of course, break it into premises, put it on Blackboard and go premise by premise, and always ask, well, does 4 follow from 3? Does 3 follow from 2? And so on. We will then use some terminology like this: follow, valid, sound, constructive dilemma, modus ponens, reductio ad absurdum, excluded middle, box, diamond, whatever. The point is, we can use all these things, all these philosophical tools and kits. We can use it, but if we use it at the right place, then students will have a motive. For instance, model fallacy. God damn it, what is model fallacy? What's boxed down? Who cares? However, if you do the C battle argument and then introduce the model fallacy, then students naturally follow. They don't question it. What is this? What's the purpose of this? No, they just follow the argumentation. Naturally, they get hooked naturally, because that's the natural place where this argument or fallacy appears. This model fallacy. Or I don't know, something like a quantifier shift fallacy. Usually I'm explaining what is that in the chapter on meaning of life. So the fact that everything that we do has a sense. It does not follow that our life as a whole has a single sense. So if from the fact that there is a reason for every our action, it does not follow that there is a single reason for everything that we do. So then you go with fathers, mothers, wives. So from the fact that every wife has a husband, it does not follow that all wives have the same husband, and so on. So these are natural places for introducing philosophical arguments. Or Descartes' model argument for dualism. You teach philosophy of mind, then introduce model argument for dualism, or deterministic dilemma, and so on and so on. 11, that's not easy. Make students talk. Generally, it's much easier to make philosophy students to talk than other students. Others are somehow psychologists. They are like learning machines, but they don't react. They have absolute A's at the exams. They learn everything. They just don't react. Why? Why should I waste my time reacting? So, make students talk. They should use these concepts and tools that are introduced. And you can get that. They are usually at the same lecture, they start talking about, I don't know, model fallacy or quantifier shift fallacy or something. If example is here, if motive is here, they will get hooked, they will use it. And in my opinion, there was a big deal between teaching philosophy and doing philosophy. Especially this article is dedicated to one colleague who was retired and he was teaching these methodics. And he had several works about teaching philosophy and doing philosophy. In my opinion, if you put problems on the blackboard and discuss them with the students, that's it. You are doing philosophy. There's no difference between doing philosophy and teaching philosophy. Say, you take this John Searle's How to Derive What from Is, that John Smith, he borrowed him $5, so he ought to pay him back $5. Here we have ought, we start with is, so the gap is closed, naturalism is true. And you do it for 75 minutes. That is doing philosophy. That is doing philosophy and teaching philosophy at the same time. Well, and that's the best way to do it. Well, Nike had that slogan, just do it. Well, that's it. So teacher has to keep discussion focused, and it's not hard thing to do. Well, naturally students maybe want to talk about the role of religion in society or alienation in contemporary blah 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 blah. No, keep on quantifiers and philosophical tools. Actually, it's not boring to them. They love it. They want it. That's why they came to your lecture. They want to hear philosophy. They don't want to hear literature or something else or political comments. They are on your lecture because they want to hear about philosophy. Then always interpret students' questions and comments in the best possible light. Maybe I'm exaggerating that, but usually what students say is kind of not completely articulated, usually 2 or 3 related things together and so on. Interpret it in the best possible light. And if possible, something like, it seems that one of the things that you have in mind is, or perhaps you want to say the following, or there's some classical intuitions like, I don't know, dualism, physicalism, utilitarianism, whatever, then you should say that. You should encourage them to talk and to formulate their thoughts clearly. Then, 13, introduce philosophical toolkit when it is needed, not before that and not independently of that. For instance, the burden of proof, shifting the burden of proof, the natural place is Stratonian presumption in the discussion between theism and atheism. That's the natural place for introducing the metaphilosophical problem of shifting the burden of proof. Of course, you explain it first you start with theism, atheism, then you explain it through jurisprudence. That's where the notion is mostly used, and then you go back to philosophy or metaphilosophy. Some philosophy departments, replaced introduction to philosophy with philosophical terminology. In my opinion, that's wrong. It's not a catastrophic error. It's not a disaster, but it's wrong. It's better to have philosophical problems. Because if you have this philosophical terminology, the idea is, okay, first now we are at the first year, now we will teach you the words, you will know the terminology, so that in the other 3 or 4 years of your study, you can use these words. It doesn't go that way. It's not that you are first learning terms and then you are using them. You are learning them as you are using them. So they should be introduced through philosophical problems. 14, spend needed time on distinctions. Some distinctions have to be, you have to spend time on some distinctions. For instance, this fact-value distinction. Fact-value or between A and B series of time, or what is for fact-value useful is Max Weber's idea of Wertfreiheit, that science should be free of values and so on. So these ought, is, and A series, B series of time, and so on. You have to explain these distinctions, and it takes time. And don't feel sorry for time, you have to do it. There is no other way. You have to spend 20 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever it takes. Once you go through fact-value distinction properly, once they get it, well, at some superficial level, they get it right away. But that is kind of superficial. Well, next step is to give them value terms and tell them to distinguish value component from factual component. But it can be done without any problems. Once you do that, then you can teach metaethics, error theory, or emotivism, naturalism, whatever you want, once you explain the fact-value distinction. Or maybe in philosophy of mind, this distinction between physical and mental. Once they get it, you can go on as much as you want. For instance, quite often students conflate modality and temporality. They conflate actual with present and so on. But that's third year at metaphysics. But if you have these problems, or the same, all possible and probable and so on, well, spend needed time. 15, keep things apart. When you lecture on one thing, then lecture on one thing only. Forget about ramifications and implications, so keep the focus 75 minutes. 16. Now this is questionable, but I think it's good. Give them questions. Give students questions in advance. I'm doing that. I call that army model of learning. It's kind of stupid model, but it's why it's good, because they stay focused. They don't waste their time. Especially some mediocre students. They can lose a lot of time and they can memorize unimportant things. So by giving them questions, you're focusing them, you're saving their time, their effort. The bad thing about giving questions is that they're making some notices and that they're just learning. They don't go through the text proper, but they're just learning some short, quick answers. That's the risk, but so I'm giving them actually 200 questions for a semester, and the test has 20 out of these 200. So that's the measure. And the final point, that was one of the things that this colleague to whom the volume is dedicated, Rudi Kotnik from Maribor, Slovenia, he dedicated a lot of that, is this difference, if there is this difference between teaching philosophy and doing philosophy. In my opinion, if you teach it in the right way, then you're just doing philosophy. So the teaching philosophy just is doing philosophy. There is no other way. If you are putting problems on the blackboard in clear and understandable way, discuss that with students, then you are doing philosophy and they are doing philosophy. For instance, I don't know, if you are together with students, you are wrestling with Getier's counterexamples to the definition of knowledge. That is doing philosophy. Or you wonder whether Thomas Hobbes' fool is really a fool, or he is not a fool. You are doing philosophy. So in Searle's argument, whether John ought to give back, to pay $5 to Smith or not, you're doing philosophy. That is what philosophy is. Or in, I don't know, in model version of ontological argument for God's existence of Malcolm and Harrison, you're discussing whether fifth step follows from fourth. You are doing philosophy. Well, that is what philosophy is. So general advice is, if you have to teach philosophy, don't worry, just do it. Take good problems, good questions, and just do it. Avoid this single standard narrative that goes from pre-Socratics to Sartre or Heidegger. That's nothing. Just focus on the problems. Yeah, and that's it. Thank you.